Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Pilgrim, the director of the Steward House at Silver Hill Hospital, and I am here with Mr. Ben Tuff, who's an amazing person, and we're here for the Tell Us More on the Silver Hill radio station, and we would like to know more about you, Mr. Tuff.
Yeah, it's been quite a while actually since people have called me Mr. Tuff, as I was a junior boarding school teacher for 21 years and was always known as Mr. Tuff. But now everybody calls me Ben, which is so great. There's no formality left. But I actually graduated from Silver Hill, as I like to think, 11 years ago. And there's one thing that I've learned in my kind of longer sobriety, and longer as in it was day by day for so long, and then it became month by month or week by week and then year by year. And I look back at my time here at Silver Hill with so much fondness, because this is the place that I was reborn. Mm-hmm. And this is what has set me out on this new path that I have found. And if you were to tell me 11 years ago, when I first stepped foot on the Silver Hill campus, that I would have made a documentary, or a documentary maker would have made a documentary about me, about my journey in sobriety and learning how to swim and doing these crazy swims that I do, I would have said you were nuts. I would have said you were totally out of your mind. I don't know what you're talking about. And here I am. I quit teaching in February, and we had recently moved to Vermont with my family, where my wife is from. And I am now pursuing my career in helping students and adults become a little bit more aware as to what addiction is, how to recognize it, and how to address it. And I think the one thing missing early on in my sobriety was having someone in sobriety who I could really look up to, and who I could say, man, I wish I had what that person has. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a difference of time, or maybe it's just because I lived quite a sheltered existence around a lot of people who drank a lot, which is very true. But if I can help present a situation and present my own story to people who are struggling and have them think, wow, I could have that, and in the end, it could be pretty amazing, then I'm doing my job.
Fantastic. Yes. I like how you want to give back and share your story and be with other people and kind of tell them how you got here. So for you, the beginning of your recovery journey, even before you set foot at Silver Hill, were you aware that alcohol had become a problem for you? Did someone tell you that? What happened?
So the one issue for me with alcoholism is it became so normalized around me. And, it goes back to when I was just a teenager and I was in high school, going to high school parties or hanging out with my buddies in Newport, Rhode Island. Everybody around me, we were all kind of doing the same thing, and it was normal to go out and drink excessively and play games, and what I didn't know is that I was headed down a very dangerous path. And it wasn't until about 14 years ago when things really started to go downhill for me. And I used alcohol to combat anything wrong in my life. And what I didn't realize at the time is that when I was down in the dumps and depressed and unhappy, I would just try to drink over that, and that would just push it to a even deeper level. But then I also found excuses when I was on top of the world, and I felt like everything was great, and I drank over that as well. What I didn't know is that I had this thing called bipolar. And, bipolar disorder is something that you can't quite put a name on, especially if you don't know anything about it. And it wasn't until I made the decision to address my alcoholism here at Silver Hill that Dr. Murata said, oh, well, you know what? There's a very good reason why you're feeling the way you are and why you're treating yourself the way you are. And that's because you have this thing called bipolar, and it's very easy to address and to get to the bottom of.
Yes. There is a high correlation between having bipolar disorder and developing alcohol use disorder. And so I'm glad you learned that by coming here. What was your experience coming here?
I didn't really have a choice. So I'm a very sensitive guy, and when I first gave up and said, okay, I'm done with this, I was in a very tight spot in that I had an anxiety attack, and my wife took me to the hospital. It was 11:30 in the morning, and I'm in the triage room waiting to get admitted to the hospital. And I said to the nurse after 45 minutes or an hour, I'm like, what is taking so long? Like, can you just let me in? Let me see a doctor? Give me my Ativan or give me whatever it is that I need to get over this feeling? And the nurse looks over at both of us and says, well, we can't do that until your blood alcohol content comes below the legal limit. And I had stopped drinking the night before at 9 p.m. And some people ask me, did I want to get caught? Was I asking for this? And in retrospect, I would love to say yes, but I didn't know what I wanted. I was so lost in this disease that nothing really mattered. And so my wife turned around to me and she said, that's it. You need to choose. Either you have us and your family or you go and get help. And I said, sign me up. I'm going to get help. Let's go. I'm going to go. And I detoxed in Torrington at a not so nice hospital. And so when I stepped foot on Silver Hill, I was like, oh my gosh, this place is awesome. Like, literally, I was in like one of the scariest psych wards in New England, which was great for me because it made the immersion into Silver Hill that much more comfortable. And the one thing I was so scared of was confirmed. The second I walked in that door, it was about 3:30, and they were all getting together about to have an AA meeting just in the house. Mm-hmm. And I had such a fear of AA. Oh. I had such the stigma involved in it, the faith part in it, a lot of it was very intimidating to me. And little did I know that just after a couple of days of going through the process of going to 12-step meetings and illuminating the whole idea of what the recipe for success for addiction might be, it was like, let's go. It's go time. Mm-hmm. And it was a couple of years ago when I was coming back to talk to Dr. Murata, and I said, Rocky, like, what did the nurses and what did everyone in the house, what did the workers say about me and my time here? And what was like the backdoor conversation? And he was like, well, I can tell you that now. But they all thought you were way too happy to be here. They thought that there was something going on because you were just so excited about everything, about going to meals, going to meetings, getting involved. And I said, yeah, that's me. And he laughed and he said, yep, it hasn't changed. So it did definitely help that I adopted that mentality. I got over any kind of idea that AA was not a good approach for me. And through I think to be part of the camaraderie of being in Steward House for me, I was in Steward, was such a fun thing because it truly meant that you are not alone. And I wasn't alone.
Exactly. That's wonderful. I'm really, really glad that you had that experience there. What role did therapy play in your recovery? Did you have experience with therapy before coming to Silver Hill?
Well, I quickly learned that therapy is only as good as you make it. And
Yes.
even though I had a year of therapy, it was a year of therapy where I didn't tell the truth because I was holding so much back to my therapist, and you're not going to get much out of that. But I found, again, just for me, the DBT and the CBT approaches to life I never heard of anything like it before. Nor had I ever been given the skills of how to navigate the world on my own without alcohol.
Yes.
The quick fix is alcohol, or was alcohol for me. But now I had to face these issues, and there's no way I could do that unless I had the skills. And so I found that this was the therapy that I was afforded, and just by anything, it's like riding a bike. The more you do it and the more you practice it, the better off you're going to be. And I found that in my time after Silver Hill, as I practiced the different techniques and the different approaches to overcoming adversity, it got easier each time. And even though life isn't perfect and there are going to be ups and downs, it's how you deal with those ups and downs.
Yes. Wonderful. Okay. So I assume you spent 28 days here at
Actually,
Steward.
I didn't. I spent 35 days here.
Okay.
I was a teacher, and I got here on April 29th, and I wanted to make sure that when I left here, when I went back to school, it was an empty school, because it would have been so many questions to answer, and I wasn't ready for that. I didn't think that it would be very conducive to my recovery if I were to go back to school without having the skills to explain where I'd been.
Yes.
So I decided, you know what? I talked to Rocky, and I said, I think I want to stay one extra week. And everyone concurred. So I ended up having a bonus week here.
Ah, excellent. I often encourage my patients to stay longer than 28 days. 28 days isn't enough. I'm glad you stayed.
Yes, yes.
So Steward House was not created while you were here 11 years ago. It's a newer program. But my patients also struggle with substance use disorders and mental health disorders concurrently. And their biggest question to me when they're on their way out of my program is, how long is this going to last? How will I be able to use these skills? Will I be able to practice? I've been in this bubble at Silver Hill for all these weeks. I'm afraid to return home. So what did you take with you from Silver Hill, and how did you continue on this path?
So, I was very strict I'm such a rule follower. And so not only did Silver Hill, but my temporary sponsor here in New Canaan, who's still my temporary sponsor, and he and I talked at length about the importance of adhering to a firm schedule, and for having the scaffolding and the scheduling and to fill space, because in early sobriety, many people know that it's some of the hardest times are the down times.
Yes.
And so I did my 90 and 90. I did way more than that, actually, because my sponsor also said, Ben, you need to learn something new. And I was like, well, what can I do new? And what can help take care of me? Well, how can I do this? And he said, well, you said you like triathlon, and that's one of the reasons why you chose me as the sponsor. So why don't you do triathlon? I said, well, I don't know how to swim. He said, well, then you've just filled up a little bit more time. You're going to learn how to swim. I said, done. And so I would go to my morning meeting at 7:30. I went to an early bird meeting, not too far, about 25 minutes from my house. And then straight from there, I would go to the pool and I would swim for 2 hours, or as close to that as possible, teach myself how to swim. And that would fill my morning, and I would feel so awesome afterwards. And I actually started working out in the gym here at Silver Hill. And I said to myself, I remember very clearly, I said, okay, if I'm not going to destroy my body anymore with alcohol, I want to be in the best shape humanly possible. So go big or go home. Mm-hmm. And so I've been able to really, even to this day, on a daily basis, for that next day, I will lay out exactly what my plan is. And there has to be at least part of that plan that involves recovery, because none of us can be immune to what is innately in us. And I'm speaking for myself there, but if I don't remind myself, listen, this is a disease that you have and you have to live with, so you need to address it on a daily basis and do it as effectively as possible. And so part of my recovery is actually swimming. And I practice a lot of my DBT and CBT skills while I swim. Mm-hmm. That is my place. That is Ben's time. That's where I process. That's where I disappear. And it has been such a healthy thing for me.
Yes. Oh, I love that. It sounds like swimming is very mindful for you.
100%. 100%.
Awesome. So what would you say was the biggest thing you took away from Silver Hill?
So I think that the biggest thing for me is that I was taught since I was born that selfish behavior is a really bad thing. But when you deal with a disease like alcoholism or addiction, sometimes you have to be selfish in your recovery. Mm-hmm. And not selfish in a bad way, but by making time for yourself. And personally, I think that whether you're in recovery or not, it's so important for you to have your time and to set aside healthy habits and healthy activities that you can do for yourself, to better your mind, and to process things in a positive way. And Silver Hill taught me not only how to process, but it taught me to make those sacrifices.
Yes. Oh, that's really important. How has your sobriety affected your family and friends? And what I mean by that is a lot of my patients worry about social gatherings, and we were the house where the parties would happen, and we have this extensive wine collection. I can't give that up. How did your social life or your relationship with them change in your sobriety?
There's no doubt that they changed. And the number one thing that changed is I found out who my true friends were.
Yes.
And In the documentary that I recently made, I talk extensively about your support group and who those people are. And so, yes, I might have lost some connections because I no longer went over to so-and-so's house to drink a lot or to party or to do all these things. But I quickly realized that those relationships weren't real relationships because they were based solely on alcohol, and they were based solely on these false pretenses and these fake relationships. So now I found that the most important piece about friendship is quality, not quantity. And now, even in recovery, the friendships that I'm making for the first time are genuine connections instead of these fuzzy connections that weren't real and didn't have the base of a true relationship. And the same is true about my kids and family. I look back and my kids don't remember me ever drinking. And to have that is such a breath of fresh air. And yes, it did take time to build back some of that trust with my wife, but that was the result of what I put myself in. And trust takes time, but if you're doing the right thing, then you get that back, and you get that back to a whole nother degree because you've never really had it before.
Yes. Yes, I was going to say honesty plays such a big role in sobriety, and definitely in yours when you were talking before about not telling your therapist the truth and not telling your wife the truth. And now, what's your experience of living honestly?
It's just such a relief because I just remember trying to always cover up the lies and getting caught up in them and bumbling and not having an out. And to go to bed each night with first of all, the ability to process and also with a clear conscience it's something that you can't even put into words or you can't even describe. And that's why one of my goals is to try and inspire people who do have a problem to make this change. And if they do make this change and they are honest to themselves, then a byproduct of that naturally will be honesty to others.
Yes. Oh, I'd love to have you come speak at Steward House. Everyone needs to hear what you have to say. What's next for Ben Tuff?
So that is a question I've been getting a lot of recently. And so my movie came out day before yesterday.
Congrats.
Thank you. We had a showing of it in Atlanta, and the feedback was amazing. Mm-hmm. And now I will be doing a couple screenings across New England, and then I'm actually going to be traveling the world. And depending on which film festivals the film gets into, I will be going to those areas. But I'm also set to go speak at middle schools, upper schools, boarding schools, and colleges, and showing my film and telling people about my story and about my journey. Because one of the things that I say when I speak is, if I could get everybody who possibly could get together, if I could get everybody to go to a place like Silver Hill to take care of just themselves and concentrate on themselves for 4 to 5 weeks or whatever amount of time, only greatness is going to come of that. And yes, those of us that are suffering from a disease like alcoholism or addiction, we might need it a little bit more, but every single human could benefit from it. And they will come out learning something about themselves and learning something about how they treat and view others. And the end result is a better person and a better quality of living.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And that's ironic coming from, like, if someone 13 years ago said, oh, I'm going to rehab, or I just went to rehab, you know, the stigma that I automatically attached to that was like, oh man, they're really messed up. Like, never would I have thought that I would end up going to a rehab until I did. And that's exactly what I needed.
Yes. Yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me today and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Yes. I walked in and didn't know you, and now you're a friend for life.
That's how it works at Silver Hill, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm getting your contact information and definitely having you come speak to my patients.
Awesome. I would love that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks.
Did we